Hello, dear listeners. I am Anna Tider, and this is Thank You, Mama. And before we jump into this week's interview, I wanted to share with you a podcast I just discovered. It's called The Pumping Podcast, and its host, Jessica Lorian Martinez, interviews women about different aspects of motherhood, from combining motherhood with a career, struggling with infertility, staying fit, sleep, and as one episode title perfectly says, all the shit nobody tells you. Jessica is very charming and her guests are open and sweet. I got hooked. It will remind you that you are not alone and make you feel stronger and more inspired as a mother and as just you. So look it up. I will share a link in my episode notes. Hi and welcome to Thank You, Mama. My name is Anna Tider. I'm welcoming Leisa Peterson today. Hi, Leisa.
Hello.
Leisa has been in financial services for over 25 years, and now she's a book author. Her book is coming out in July, and it's called The Mindful Millionaire. And Leisa is also a host and a creator of two podcasts. One is called The Art of Abundance, and the other one is The Mindful Millionaire. Leisa, I want you to tell us more about your work, but first here's a curious question. Why are you spelled L-E-I-S-A and not L-I-S-A?
It's a great question. And my mom, the way that I understand it is my mom was just being creative. You know, I was born in 1966 and my parents were pretty conservative at that time. And that was her little show of rebellion. I'm going to do something a little different, and made it up.
That's cute. So you have a little rebellion tied into your identity, basically.
Yes. And yeah, they got more than they realized.
They didn't have to play with letters.
Right.
Tell me about The Mindful Millionaire and about your work.
Thank you. So the work stems from this idea that true wealth is about finding the balance between your heart and your wallet, feeling like you can create what you most want for yourself, and being financially comfortable enough that you feel like you have the ability to choose your path in life. And I think that my journey was different than that. Like, it took me a while to arrive at this understanding. So we're just going to tell everybody this is the secret. But finding that true wealth in my own life took a lot of time and energy. And, it was put simply, I grew up with parents who had barely finished high school, were not very educated. They really struggled with money. Money was a source of great stress in my home growing up. And later in life, pretty early in life, I decided that if I had money, my life would be so much better because I wouldn't fight about it. I wouldn't be worried about it. And then I'd be happy. And so I made the first half of my life all about making lots of money and, deciding to get my MBA. And I was a really creative kid. And in fact, I studied clothing design when I was in college. And then I got out of school during the time of a recession, and I got a job, but it was so low paid. I had made more money when I was in college than what I was making full time working for a clothing designer. And I thought, you know what, if I'm not careful, I'm going to turn out just like my parents. And I decided to go back to school and get my MBA and start working in finance. So 25 years of working in finance, simultaneous to having a 21 years ago, my father was brutally murdered. And when that happened, I kind of had a breakdown, as you can imagine. And in the course of trying to make myself feel better, I got super involved in mindfulness and the teachings of Buddha at the time. And so I started bringing spiritual understanding into my life path in addition to my journey with money. And so that was a long time ago, but about 6 years ago, I realized that it was time for me to start a business, leave my financial career, and start helping people, not just with managing their money better, which was interesting to me, but more important was how could I help people deal with this emotional stuff that was happening under the surface. And so the book is this journey of how can I use my knowledge and expertise about mindfulness and money to help people create a better relationship with money for themselves.
First, let me say I'm very, very sorry about your father. That must have been a horrendous experience. But then I want to tie into what you are doing with one of the lessons I have not learned from my mom, which is dealing with money. And I'm very curious about this whole idea of mindfulness and how much our mindset influences how abundant we feel or not. I think it's a very, very interesting topic. Thank you for covering
it. Thank you.
Let's talk about Mama Jacquie.
Yeah.
Tell me about Mama Jacquie. Where is she from? What is her story?
So she was born in Chicago, and my mom was like fiery red hair and just the most vivacious personality that you could imagine. In fact, later in life, she got a big red and white fat boy Harley that she would drive around.
I love that. Was she big enough to drive a fat boy?
She, like a big motorcycle.
Oh my God, that's
yeah. She would drive it, and I started riding motorcycles because of my family's interest in motorcycles when I was pretty young. So I get it, but she was like, I've never ridden a motorcycle as big as her motorcycle.
How old was she when she got her fat boy Harley?
I think she got it when I was in my 20s, I think right about the time I was graduating from college. And so my mom had me when she was 19, almost 20, and, pretty young, like I said, didn't go to college, was a hairdresser ultimately. When I was about 4, she got trained to become a hairstylist. And just, she was just so young and so vibrant. I just remember her being like that fun mom that everybody really liked.
Did she have more children?
Yeah, I have a younger brother who's 3 years younger, and he also has fiery red hair. My hair's a little bit red, but those two are like two peas in a pod. Just rebellious in a lot of different ways. I'm rebellious, but not in the same way as those two.
And she was married to your dad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, until I was in college, and then they split up. So my parents, I always like to think of the way that things went down in my home as very complicated, in that there was a lot of struggles with money, but there was never any confusion about love. Like, my parents were passionately in love with each other. My family always knew that no matter what fight we had or what struggle we had, like, everybody loved each other. And I now, because of the work I do in helping people, with mindset, I realize that was I probably took it for granted at just how much love there was in the home, even though there was also a lot of trauma. Yeah. Because they both had come from really rough backgrounds. I think both of them had been abused pretty bad when they were young. And I think their goal in having children was to not pass that on to us. But so it's interesting because, I think they were conscious of that, but then they still couldn't avoid taking out their pain on us. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? They still didn't have the power. Mm-hmm. but they ended up becoming hippies. So I grew up in the East Bay area, and by the time my mom started cutting hair, the people they started meeting in Oakland and in San Francisco, here it is, early 70s, they started hanging out with a lot of hippies. And and my whole childhood was just very interesting in that we would go to parties that would last like all weekend long. And we lived in the suburbs. So my parents didn't want us to grow up in the city because they had grown up in the inner city. So they took us to the suburbs, but every weekend we would go to these parties and kind of be exposed to more of a city life in Berkley in the 70s, which was a very interesting place. But there was this richness to that culture that I got exposed to that I think, did foster this sort of, you can do anything, don't let the walls stop you. You are the controller of your destiny.
Berkley, just for the listeners who don't know, Berkley is basically where the whole 1968 culture started, isn't it?
Yeah.
The country movement
San Francisco,
and the hippie movement. Yes. I have in my notes something that I want to ask you about again, where you said that I think I wrote it down about your mom, that she never showed the hardships she went through. And I just wrote it down, but then looking at it again, I thought, this feels very European to me because after 10 years of living in this country, I have a feeling in Europe, we like, more than Americans would like to pretend everything's okay, we can do this. Put your lipstick on and just raise your head high and it's okay, you're fine.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting way to think about it, because she did not, I think it was so bad what she was exposed to that she didn't want to break our spirit early in life. And so even though she suffered from depression, and I'd say undiagnosed, maybe when I was still at home, bipolar, where she would have those really, really bad lows and then the really big highs, and there wasn't a lot of in between. So her actions were still traumatizing for me, but my mom never told me why she was so struggling with these inner demons for all of my life. So it was an action of love that she just didn't want those harsh realities to be seen, which is interesting too, because now I think maybe why my spiritual journey over this past 21 years has been so enlightening for me is I feel like there were so many things that I didn't understand. And on her, in her favor, she was trying to protect me. But later on in life, I was like, wow, if I had understood some of these things, maybe I could have addressed them. I just didn't know what to do. And I think we didn't have money to go to like therapy or something, but there were a few times that we tried as a family to go see somebody, but we just ended up all fighting with each other. It was like, they did try little things, but when you don't have money, you're not like, oh, let's go hire a therapist, especially in the 70s or 80s.
My experience is a little different. And it's interesting that my mom was quite vocal about all the bad things, which obviously were not as bad as things your mom went through. But she lost her parents when she was very, very young, and she did go through quite a lot. What's interesting for me is that was I heard that narrative so often in my life that I kind of took it for granted, and I never, until I lost her and felt what it really means to lose a parent you love, I didn't really understand where she comes from. I couldn't grasp how big and deep these emotions are and what it really means and how directly it influences the way she behaves and is and behaves towards me. I wish I knew that. I wish I knew better while she was alive.
It's a very interesting point that you bring up, because I think that many times in the work that I do, we do end up going into these relationships. And because I've looked so deeply into my relationship with my mom as part of my own healing process, I noticed that a lot of people haven't done that. When they're still alive, there's still those daily dynamics of what's going on that can be very, you're like, you get irritated, you get frustrated, then you have another conversation and maybe it goes well, but you just kind of are living in the moment with that relationship. But the reflection when they pass, and I do feel like because both of my parents are no longer alive, I've done so much work. And I will tell people that I think it's easier sometimes to do this work when they're no longer here. Because you don't get triggered over and over again. You just have the memory of that person to work with.
But this is partially what I hope that this podcast will do for the listeners, is to motivate them to understand their mothers and where they come from, and understand that what they were able to give is due to the circumstances, their own circumstances. I think it's a very big part of our own healing and understanding, and tearing down any barriers for our love to flow freely, if I can say it in this hippie way. Let's talk about lessons. You gave me a few very, very, very interesting lessons that you've learned from Mama Jacquie. Will you share them with us?
Sure. Was there one in particular? Because that will sort of bring me, I know you wrote some notes.
Well, the first one, which I think beautifully connects to what we just talked about, was don't let past dictate what the future will be like.
Yeah, so she was teaching that to me by, like, I think we said, maybe let me paint the canvas of my life. And she's not telling me who to be or what to be, but she's allowing and encouraging me. And I think this has been a big lesson because I have a daughter now who's 22. And I see, I see how I've gotten some of the lessons my mom taught me, where there was so much freedom and so much love and acceptance that even though we did not live, all my needs were always met, but I always felt like there wasn't enough. So even though we lived that way, my mom didn't make me think that that was going to be my future. She encouraged me to let me pave my own path. And if I wanted money and I wanted to be wealthy, then she was like, go for it. Like every step of the way, go for it. And so that was beautiful.
And she was a hippie. So it must have been hard for her to be like, yeah, what, daughter, you want to be rich? Yes, that's a good thing.
I think that growing up and watching me get a job, like I remember I asked her to take me to the bank when I was 10, and I said, I want to get a checking account. My mom's like, okay, that's kind of weird. And she took me to the checking account. And then I came home from JCPenney's when I was 12, and I said, Mom, I came up with a scheme. This lady at the store said, do you want to get a credit card? And I figured I needed to be 18. So I lied about my age. I filled out the credit card application. And instead of telling him I work for you in your business, which I did at the time, I was the janitor for this hair salon that she owned. I said I worked for her partner. I mean, at 12 years old, I already figured this out. And sure enough, JCPenney's called and my mom's partner and confirmed that I was employed by her company, and I got a credit card. And my mom was like, okay, you're weird, but she was supportive of it. I mean, I lied. I'm sorry. But it was just a weird, interesting thing that my mom was like, if this is important to you, I am not going to stand in your way.
And then I have a lesson here that says, whatever you do, whatever it takes to provide for your family.
So there is no one, maybe my husband and my mom, the people that I know in this lifetime, that literally, I think it'd be impossible to work harder than those two people. So my mom, she would leave to work at like 7:00 in the morning to go cut hair. And she often wasn't home till like 9:00 at night. And that was how she figured out that she could pay the bills and keep us afloat. She also had I think, a bit of a spending problem. Maybe I noticed it more later in life. Early on, it was just like my dad had a spending problem. But again, she worked so hard and I think instilled these like very, very strong values about hard work, and taking good care of yourself. Like she did teach me that.
I hear Harleys in your background. It's so funny when we're just talking about them and there's this deep boom. Do you think that you've learned it from her? Do you think this is where your hard work and your success comes from?
I do. I think that partly it was the working hard, not being afraid of putting yourself out there, trying things, keep trying until you get it right. But also because she wasn't good at saving money and she was always kind of in financial stress, I learned the opposite lesson, which was save money. Don't spend more than what you make. Make sure that you're always saving and that you have a nest egg. Like I just learned from her not doing that.
What is a nest egg?
A nest egg. So a nest egg is this idea of like have money to go to. I think her idea would have been that's your choice money. So like because my parents would fight a lot, I think my mom started learning how to put money aside so that she could always walk out or take care of us. Mm-hmm. She was going to walk out. She wasn't that person. Mm-hmm. She was going to like stay with us, but kick him out kind of thing. So the nest egg was like, I'm going to be okay no matter what, because I've sort of put some money, aside and, it might be just saving cash in the bottom of a drawer or something.
So she did not do that?
Well, it's funny because now that we're talking about it, I'm like, she did do that. I think she did do that where she would have cash stashed away. But, it's one thing to have cash, a couple $100 in cash stashed away. Then it's a completely different behavior to have, $100,000 saved in a retirement account. Like she wasn't that person.
It reminds me of my mom. My mom had this strange relationship with money where the moment money came in, it had to go out. It literally the moment, and she was a freelancer and an artist, so the money wouldn't come regularly. It would come in these big batches. And then the moment it came, we lived like queens and burned it all out. And it was as if she had a fight with money, as if she just didn't want to have any. Looking back, it's really like it just had to flow. It just had to flow out. It had to flow away immediately.
Yes, I think we're uncovering a very common thing, which is this worthiness. Like, I don't think that my mom felt worthy to hold on to a lot of money.
That's interesting. That's an interesting point. I never thought about it that way.
A lot of the issues that we struggle with are around feeling not enough, that all roads lead to that. But this, on the way to that, this feeling like I'm not worthy of having a lot of money. And so my mom did the same thing. I think it was more comfortable to have the money being spent. And that might be on us, that may be on her, but she would spend it as fast as she got it.
Well, you and I turned to be good savers then. We are learning from our moms. But this is the interesting part of this podcast is that question. What did she not teach you? What did you have to learn yourself? I think we learned the same lesson. Let me see what other things I have written down. I have figured out how to be independent and not rely on a man.
Yeah, that's a big one I'm guessing for a lot of women, maybe especially in my generation, but maybe even later, this idea that you don't want to be dependent on anyone, that it's up to you. And that I think because my mom did not have a strong father figure, she learned not to depend on men. And it was a pretty uncomfortable thing for us growing up, because I think she was really, really hard on my dad, even though there was plenty of times where he had earned that kind of, I guess, disrespect, because he would lose jobs all the time, and he would go off, and there were a lot of drugs and stuff involved, and he would spend money on drugs, and so she couldn't rely on him. But I think that what I've learned, and maybe what you've learned in your journey, is that when we believe something to the core of our being, that's what we believe, and that's what we have in our lives. Like, that's what we're attracted to. So she was attracted to somebody who was unreliable because she had never had a reliable father figure in her life. Mm-hmm. And I think I've had to really work on that, because in my own life, my husband, like I said, he works really, really hard, but we've had different dynamics in our relationship where I've often been the primary breadwinner, and he's been more responsible for raising our children and being home and accessible and having jobs that didn't make him travel. Like, he liked that part of it. But then which is awesome. Like, all of those things are awesome. The only problem was that I still had some of these beliefs that I had watched my mom instill in me about men not being reliable. Mm-hmm. See that? And it created a lot of problems in my relationship. Now we've been together for 32 years, so it's been a long time, but I'd say the first 10 years, poor guy, like, I was not very pleasant about this with him.
It's beautiful you healed it.
Yeah, stuck with it, tenacity.
Yeah.
Like, and he's someone who came. His parents are still together, and this term, might not be familiar to you, but it's like, when we were kids, there was the Ozzie and Harriet show. And so this like idea of like the utopian family, that just loves each other, and they're so nice, and they never really fight. And like, my husband came from that kind of home, and I was drawn to him because he had such security in his relationship at home, and I didn't have that. So it's so funny how we are drawn to people, sometimes that come from completely opposite backgrounds. And in this case, it really helped. So he's committed to the long haul, even if I had to work out my stuff for many years.
It's interesting how many women I spoke to talk about maybe being overly independent and having the trust issue. Mm-hmm. I had to be kidnapped into another country, to the other side of the world, to be able to be forced to trust. That was a joke, but it was just illustrating how it had to happen for me.
I get it completely.
But that leads us nicely to something you mentioned you did not learn from her, one of the two things, which is to take care of our emotional health. Yeah,
gosh. Later in life, I think my mom got on medication to help her. But by that time, maybe I was in my late teens, and we didn't really talk too much about it, but I just know that helped her. But she didn't know that there were ways to feel better. The one thing my parents did that I think they thought was going to help with the mental health was when I was 12. Now, mind you, my parents are hippies, and the Mormon church, first of all, my mom had a relationship because in high school, the Mormon church had found her places to live so she wouldn't be homeless until she graduated from high school. So there was a fond affinity to the Mormon church. So my parents are hippies. The Mormon church back in the 1970s would not be where hippies would be found. I mean, just like complete stark difference. But my parents decided they would bring my brother and I to the Mormon church to kind of learn about God. And that didn't turn out so well. Like, we got baptized and we learned, but as soon as we got baptized, then they were like, okay, we don't need to go anymore, And by the way, whenever we would show up, we looked like a sore thumb, that just stood out in the sea of like conservatism. And my parents had long hair, and they smoked and they drank, and it was pretty funny. But the point is that was the only thing my mom knew to do to kind of help us think differently about life and our own mental health was kind of to go to church and see if that might help us. And it didn't really help too much. And fast forward, when I was in college and things were really breaking apart and in my relationship with especially my dad. So this is 10 years before he was killed. He had such a kind of negative impact in my life, and he was very controlling. And he told me that if I crashed this car that he and I had worked on together, that I shouldn't come home. And I mean, he meant it, because I had sort of, I got cars when I first turned 16, and I would total them. Like I totaled a couple of them, being kind of reckless and irresponsible. So it's not like he didn't have reason to tell me this, but he told me this. And then a few years later, I'm in college and I got in a car wreck, and I was so distraught by what I had done that I tried to commit suicide. And when I came out of it, I realized that I needed to start focusing on my mental health. That was when I first came in contact with meditation, and I pushed my dad out of my life. So from that time until he was killed 10 years later, I didn't really have any connection or contact with him. But that was my way of finding some way to take care of myself, looking at the toxic relationship I had with him and saying, I can't do this anymore. You're not welcome here. I'm not stable when you're around. And then I started reinventing my life. Interesting enough, it was like within a year of that whole thing happening, I met my husband.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But you make it sound so simple, but it's so courageous and so hard to do. To face your demons and to tell people whom you love but who are not doing you good to stay away.
Yeah.
It's
and
hard.
Thankfully
it's so hard.
And my mom was really, she understood, because she had had her own journey. They were just recently divorced, and she saw, him and how he was behaving. And so she was really supportive, and it just deepened my relationship with my mom. I mean, I was so close to my mom, especially as that happened.
Mm-hmm. Leisa, thank you so much. Will you help me to recap?
Yeah.
So we learned from Mama Jacquie that we should not let the past dictate our future, that we should do whatever it takes to provide for our family and to be independent, figure out how to be independent, and definitely not rely on a man.
Sounds funny. Sorry.
This was my feminist mom talking out of me. Definitely do not rely on a man. It's cute. We can laugh about it.
Exactly.
What about be strong and never let them see you sweat? Do we want to put that among the lessons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we have saving. She did not teach you how to save. And have a nest egg. I just learned about the nest egg for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And to take care of your mental health in time. This is what I have here, and I think these are some amazing lessons.
Yeah, beautiful. I feel so fortunate. I mean, I feel so fortunate to have the parents that I did, and my mom. Yeah, so many beautiful lessons.
Thank you for sharing them.
Thank you for the opportunity. I love what you're up to. This is so beautiful.
Thank you so much, Leisa. If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider. That's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.